In 1989, the Ghostbusters exploded their way back onto the big screen with Ghostbusters 2. With the same cast returning, including Bill Murray, Dan Aykroyd and Sigourney Weaver, along with the original director Ivan Reitman, it would have seemed a sure thing that lightning would have struck twice. But sadly, that really wasn't the case. The movie got lukewarm at best reception on the account that it couldn't match the magic of the first movie. Does that make it a bad movie though? Hell no, it's awesome! Just like the original, it has plenty of funny and spooky moments. And it's great seeing the band back together again. The movie starts bittersweet, as we see the Ghostbusters are now a defunct business, with even some tension between some of the characters. However, everyone's favourite Busters must put aside their differences and reform in order to take on VIGO, an evil Carpathian whose spirit lives in a painting in a museum, who is being powered by slime that flows underground in New York City, which is being created out of negative energy. VIGO wants to be reborn in a new body, and plans on using Dana Barrett's baby son Oscar as his rebirth. Say what you want to say about Ghostbusters 2, but one thing you can't deny is that this time around it has a really good villain, and is generally all-round entertaining. Okay, no, it's not as good as the original, but then again, how many movies are as good as the original Ghostbusters? So today we are going to put popular opinion and prejudices aside as we look into 10 things that you may not know about Ghostbusters 2. By the way, you know the twins who played Baby Oscar? Yeah, this is what they look like now. Phil Oljet.
Suck in the guts, guys. We're the Ghostbusters.
Number 10. Fur Coat from Hell. So in Ghostbusters 2, there is a scene where the negative emotion slime wreaks havoc in the city, causing all kinds of supernatural goings-on. In one scene in particular, we see a woman wearing a fur coat, to which her coat comes to life and grows monstrous heads before fleeing into the night. Almost making it an animal rights sketch that could have been written by Peter. However, this scene was actually written for the original Ghostbusters movie, but the scene just never got round to being filmed. And so, come Ghostbusters 2, it was time to film the anti-fur sketch. Okay, did that scene where the fur coat comes alive and turns into a monster freak anyone else out when it was a kid, or was it just me? Number 9. Family relations. In the beginning of the movie, there is a completely undignified scene where Winston and Ray have been reduced to appearing at children's birthday parties. Gone are the glorious days of taking on Gozer and saving the city. They are now cheap party gimmicks. In the awkward scene in question, one bratty little boy tells the Ghostbusters,
"You know, my dad says you guys are full of crap."
Seriously though, what is this kid's problem?
No, he just says you guys are full of crap and that's why you went out of business.
Had I spoken like that at his age, I would have gotten into all kinds of trouble. This kid's dad seriously needs to talk to him. Well, it just so happens that this snotty little kid's dad is in fact the movie's director, Ivan Reitman. Yep, creating a funny irony when he says,
"You know, my dad says you guys are full of crap."
Also, when Ray and Winston enter the party, all the kids are disappointed that the mystery guest wasn't He-Man. And the scene even ends with them chanting for He-Man. I can't help but feel like this was making fun of the fact that there was a toy competition between He-Man and Ghostbusters during the 80s. Or because He-Man was produced by Filmation, which also made the other Ghostbusters cartoon. What do you guys think? Number 8. VIGO was played by 2 people. As I already mentioned, VIGO is actually a really great villain. He has clear motivation, he's threatening and menacing, and throughout the movie we actually really get to know him, unlike Gozer, who just sort of turns up at the end of the original. But as memorable as the character was, he was actually played by two people. First of all, his physical appearance was played by controversial German former boxer and wrestler Wilhelm von Homburg, whereas the voice was provided by legendary actor Max von Sydow.
Now is the season of evil.
Sydow already has a history of horror, having played Father Merrin in the original Exorcist. And throughout the 80s, he was in more and more Hollywood movies, including Flash Gordon, where he played Ming, Never Say Never Again, where he played Blofeld, and Dreamscape. And I think it was wise having him voice VIGO, as he does have a powerful voice, one that does sound beyond the ages of time. I can't believe that when I was younger I never put two and two together and realised that was the voice of Ming the Merciless. Number 7. Deleted Possession Subplot. Ever noticed how in the movie's climax, when the Ghostbusters confront VIGO for a showdown, how Ray, seemingly possessed, just strolls up to VIGO, where VIGO then takes on Ray's form? This scene was pretty weird, right? I mean, it just comes out of nowhere. Like, why was Ray just suddenly under his power and ready to sacrifice himself for VIGO's possession? Well, that's because this scene was part of a bigger subplot that was removed from the film. In the scene where the Ghostbusters pay a visit to the museum, there is a moment where Ray looks right into the painting of VIGO's eye, which causes Ray to become possessed. And in a later scene, Ray is driving Ecto-1 erratically under the possession of VIGO, where he declares that he is going to kill everyone, and is seemingly a lot more angry than his usual placid self. The scene ends when Winston punches Ray, causing Ecto-1 to crash. So later on, when the Ghostbusters confront VIGO, it's clear that Ray is still under his destructive spell. But because the whole Ray being possessed subplot was removed, it was never explained why Ray went and did what he did in the movie's climax. Speaking of deleted scenes and concepts, there was actually a scene where the Ghostbusters get attacked by a big frog monster with sharp teeth in the underground subway scene, shortly after the scene where the train disappears, but of course it was removed. And Dan Aykroyd's original concept was to have the movie take place in Scotland, where the Ghostbusters have to save Dana after she is kidnapped by a malevolent force. But it was decided to keep the action in New York, just like the first movie. Number 6. The colouring book was most strange indeed. So of course with Ghostbusters 2 came the merchandise, because with great movies comes great responsibility to sell shit. But one piece of merchandise that stood out to me was the Ghostbusters colouring book. I remember getting this as a kid and finding it strange. For a start, who are these guys? They look nothing like the Ghostbusters. Okay, looking at it from the perspective of an adult, I'm guessing it's a copyright issue and that they couldn't use the actors' likenesses. But how is it that they could license the Ghostbusters name and logo but not the Ghostbusters themselves? I always assumed that this moustache-wearing Ghostbuster was Winston, as in the original movie, Winston had a moustache. But if you look in the other pages, it's explained that this moustached Ghostbuster is in fact Ray. I don't care, that's not Ray. Check this out, the colouring book features the scene where Ray was driving Ecto-1 while he was possessed by VIGO. So before DVD and Blu-ray, if you wanted to see Ghostbusters 2's deleted scenes, then the only way you can view them was to buy the colouring book. The colouring book where Ray now has a mustache. Number 5. Alternative Titanic scene. There's a funny scene in Ghostbusters 2, where during the slime-induced pandemonium, the ghostly Titanic arrives at a New York port, along with its dead passengers, where a shocked and bewildered Cheech Marin can't believe his eyes, and says,
"Well, better late than never."
It's actually quite a creepy visual. but having it accompanied with Cheech's humour makes it more funny to watch. However, in the original script, it wasn't the Titanic that makes a cameo in the movie, but it was going to be the ghostly apparition of the Hindenburg hovering over the New York City sky. But it was decided to swap the Hindenburg disaster for another well-known disaster, and the Titanic it was. So, there you have it, folks. The propeller man from the movie Titanic lives on in Ghostbusters 2. Number 4. Batman v Ghostbusters Dawn of Blockbusters. With the fact that the original Ghostbusters was such a huge mega hit, and was just as well loved in 1989 than when it first came out 5 years earlier in 1984, it seemed that Ghostbusters 2 was a sure hit, and going to dominate the box office in the summer of 1989. However, to everyone's shock, that didn't happen, as Batman also came out at the same time and absolutely swept the box office right from under Ghostbusters 2's feet. No one could have predicted just how huge Batman was going to be. Needless to say, Ghostbusters just couldn't live up to The Dark Knight. The irony being is that at one stage, Bill Murray was even considered the role of Batman during that movie's development. To be fair though, 1989 was a huge year for franchise movies, with an intense competition, including Back to the Future 2, Indiana Jones and the Last Crusade, Lethal Weapon 2, License to Kill, A Nightmare on Elm Street 5, Friday the 13th 8, Star Trek 5, The Fly 2, and The Karate Kid 3. 1989 was one hell of a time to be alive. Number 3. Ghostbusters 2 or The Real Ghostbusters Movie. Something that people have noticed over the years is that there is a lot of similarities between Ghostbusters 2 and the animated series The Real Ghostbusters. In fact, some people claim that it feels more in line with The Real Ghostbusters than it does the original Ghostbusters movie. Now granted, the real Ghostbusters would have played a huge part in the Ghostbusters 2 development. After all, between the original and sequel, the Ghostbusters cartoon is what kept the Ghostbusters name alive and kept it fresh and popular. And it was a huge hit, ranking in the viewings, along with the toy brand, which was also a huge moneymaker. So we can only assume that Ghostbusters 2 took some tips from the real Ghostbusters, not only to try and appease fans of the original movie, but also the animated series. Some similarities include the character Janine, who looks more like how she does in the cartoon, what with her red hair and glasses. Slimer was brought back from the sequel and is now friendly because he became a popular mascot in the real Ghostbusters, and unlike the first film, his appearance actually resembles how he looks in the cartoon. The risque jokes and innuendos were toned down, there was no swearing or smoking, and sometimes in the movie, the Ghostbusters even wear different coloured jumpsuits. The slime is now purple like how it was in the real Ghostbusters, unlike the first movie where it was transparent. And the characters are generally more like their cartoon counterparts, especially Ray. Number 2. Bill Murray hates the movie. After the release of Ghostbusters 2, Dan Aykroyd wanted to get to work on a Ghostbusters 3, but there was a powerful force getting in his way. Bill Murray. Murray has always been vocal of his disapproval of Ghostbusters 2 and how he generally hated it. He apparently didn't even want to be a part of it, and supposedly while working on the movie, his and Harold Ramis's working relationship really soured. I mean, just look at Bill Murray on this Ghostbusters 2 trading card. That is a man who really doesn't want to be a trading card today. All throughout the 90s and 2000s, Aykroyd desperately tried to get Ghostbusters 3 off the ground, but just couldn't. It never happened as Murray was sticking to his guns and was refusing to return as Peter Venkman. When talking about Ghostbusters 2, Murray said, quote, "Those special effects guys took over. It was too much slime and not enough of us." Murray also once said that he would return for a Ghostbusters 3 as long as they killed off his character, no doubt knowing that that would never happen. Eventually time went on and Harold Ramis died, which killed off chances of a third entry. And for better, or worse, the franchise was rebooted with that Hilarious movie in 2016. Number 1. No one wanted to make Ghostbusters 2.
So it's that noise. The wife's working. I'm no jerk and I level boys. She's in school and
A lot of people question why would they want to even try to make a sequel to a near-perfect original. Well, here's the thing. They didn't. Writers Dan Aykroyd and Harold Ramis both felt that the original Ghostbusters ends pretty conclusively and that there was no need for a sequel. And they themselves felt that a sequel could not live up to the original. I mean, you can't blame them for feeling this way. Look what happened with Caddyshack 2. However, Columbia Pictures were putting pressure on the writers to come up with a sequel, especially considering the animated series was a huge hit. Word has it that Ramis and Aykroyd decided to do the job or someone else would, and they didn't want someone else screwing up their legacy. So, begrudgingly, the two actors got to work making the sequel. But you know what? All this is making it sound like Ghostbusters 2 is terrible, but I don't care what people say. I think it's a great movie. There are far way worse sequels out there, and this movie does recapture the comedy and spooks of the first movie. Ghostbusters 2's biggest crime is that it wasn't as good as the original. But that doesn't make it a bad movie. So definitely give Ghostbusters 2 another viewing. Don't listen to the popular opinion out there that it sucks. Anyway, I'm Minty, and there's always room for Jello. See ya.